Hey, hi, and welcome back to the Southern Millennial Mom podcast. I am Samantha May, and I'm your official Southern Millennial Mom. First off, as always, thank you to all the returning listeners. I know I've been gone for a while. I needed a break. Didn't realize I needed it until my husband pushed me into doing it. I am so grateful that he did. To all the new listeners, welcome to a refurbished version of the podcast, I guess you could call it. I don't know. But welcome. Thank you for choosing to listen to me rant, ramble, reminisce, ruminate? What? I don't know. Thanks for giving me a portion of your day. I do highly recommend that you like, follow, and subscribe to any of the streaming services that you're using to listen to this. It's on YouTube, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever. Do all the things to help this podcast grow. Also listen to any of the old episodes listen to all the old episodes because it'll help you kind of understand some of the references that I make in this episode and any new episodes. As a disclaimer, I am not sponsored by any brand, product, podcast that I mention here in this podcast. I mention them, I encourage them, I discourage them because it's my opinion. It is something that I either like or I dislike. I'm not being sponsored in any way to promote a product, a podcast, or a brand. One other thing, if you are a returning listener, you will know that the names of any minors are not mentioned in this podcast unless I have myself or whatever guest I have on this podcast have parental permission, or the minor is old enough to understand the implications of using their given name. As a quick recap of the last full episode, not the improvement content, I got to sit down and talk with my very good friend, Kate Nolan, who is an author, dog mom, wife, fellow martial artist, and we talked about her and her husband's lives as being a child-free couple and how that choice came to be, how it has affected their lives or not affected their lives, and how, when they gained temporary guardianship over a lovely young lady who is now a lovely young woman. We talked about how that changed their family dynamic, and if it changed that family dynamic. It is 0 to a few part 2, at least it should be. I could have messed up when typing in the titles. So look for that one. On to today's episode. So I want to talk about something that has been affecting our lives for the past 8 years now. And it is happening to Boo, my daughter. It happened to me a little bit. I don't know if it has ever happened to my husband in the way that it's happened to me and our daughter. And that could be a conversation for another episode. But we've all gone through this at some point in our lives, whether it was small or traumatic. But we have all gone through this at some point, and that is dealing with bullies. As a mom now, I am more aware of this situation, especially with the internet making it more widely known about. But social media does good things, does bad things, but it makes you more aware of what's going on in our kids' lives, what's going on in classrooms around the world. And Boo, my daughter, has been dealing with some kind of bully the entire time she has been going to school. If you know her, you know she is so kind, so helpful, so loving, but so naive. And I love that, but I hate that. I would love her to keep that naivete throughout her life, but I also want her to be aware of how to deal with it. And those are going to be what I want to talk about for this episode. And talk about open communication, self-defense, because there may come a point in their lives where it needs to be learned. And we're going to talk about open-mindedness. And you're probably wondering, why do I need to be open-minded about my child's bully, my bully? I'll get to that, and hopefully you can kind of understand why I decided to talk about it. But I'm going to give you a most recent story that happened to Boo. So we just come back from New Year's Christmas vacation, and there is a substitute teacher in one of my daughter's classes because her teacher was sick. But there are these two boys in this class that have been a problem for my daughter for the last 3 years since we moved school districts. And she didn't have a major problem with them for the past 2 years. They were irritating the past 2 years, but this year they have become more. They just become more because they all have one class together, and it's at the end of the day. So she's coming to the car after school because we carpool, and I can see she is upset. She is not, smiling or really talking to her friends as she's walking by them. And I ask her when she gets in the vehicle, what's wrong? She starts sniffling, she gets upset, and she tells me that one of these boys cursed at her. Now, a lot of times when she says cursing, it's not what we as adults think of as cursing. For her, it's crap and punk. Anything can be a curse word with intent. I recently learned insults from a different country from a friend of mine, and some of them are hilarious, but some of them are like, dang, that's harsh, especially if you use them in the context and intent. Anyways, she was telling me she doesn't want to say what they said because she knows she's not allowed to say those words. For her, those are adult words, and she's not allowed to say them, and that's just how our family is. If you allow your children to swear, curse, whatever you want to call it, that's your prerogative. That's not what we do. But I'm like, Boo, how am I supposed to help you if you don't tell me what these words were? You can tell me, you won't get in trouble. So she tells me what they said, and my eyebrow shot past my hairline, and I asked her, they said what? She repeated what they said, and I was like, okay, we need to talk to the principal now. And she has talked to her teacher about these boys. She has talked to her advisor that she has because she has an IEP for her dyslexia. And I think she has talked to the school counselor about it. Luckily, we're able to catch the principal before he leaves the school traffic line. And I can tell he's in a hurry, but I need to make sure he understands that it's important that we need to talk. And I tell him, you and I need to have a conversation. I tell him a couple boys in her class have been harassing her and that they cursed at her, and she told him what they said. And he's one of those principals that he seems very genuine in his concern for the students of his school. I could tell that he really was in a hurry to go. He is a principal, he has his own family, and he probably has other responsibilities outside of the school, and I'm fine with that. And he tells Boo that as soon as she gets to school that she needs to come to his office so that they can talk about it. She says, okay. We start to head home, and I ask her if she wants me there to talk with the principal. Her look of relief was a little disheartening. And when she said, "Oh, thank you, Mom, I didn't want to do this by myself," I'm like, "Boo, I would never make you do this by yourself. I am your advocate when it comes to things like this." And she's like, "I know. But I guess, she hears her friends talk, she hears other students talk, and she might be worried that I won't be there for her or her dad won't be there for her, even though we have never given her the impression that we know of that we would not be there for her." But so the next day, we go to the office, we talk. He says he will deal with these boys, and they have apparently been dealt with, but they're still irritating. And I don't know if the teacher that was out for that class heard about what happened. And these are 11, 12-year-old boys, just so you can understand why I was so concerned. But a lot of that has to do with, there's that childish, being irritating, talking when somebody asks you to be quiet, kicking the back of the chair, doing what kids do. Not that I'm giving them an out, but that's just what they do. The fact that one of these 11, 12-year-old children cursed at my daughter using, adult language and intent had me concerned that they would go beyond that, beyond the kicking of the chair, that they would get physical with her. And I told my husband this. I told my friends this, my family. That was my concern for my daughter. And my daughter, she doesn't know how to handle this kind of situation because she's a child. Even though she's about to be a teenager, she's still a child. She still has that developing brain, and she's trying to figure out her life and how to handle situations like this. And we can't expect our kids to do this. But the fact that she was concerned I wouldn't go with her to this meeting with the principal, like I said, it kind of upset me because we have always had this open communication, especially when it comes to school. My husband was homeschooled, and his only classroom experience was when he went to college. So he really doesn't understand the dynamics of a classroom as much as I do. I've been homeschooled a couple times for about a year each time, maybe 2, but the majority of my schooling has been in a school, building, campus, whatever. So I understand, how things work there. And I wanted my daughter, when she started going to kindergarten, to understand that we could talk about anything that's going on. So we've always had this open communication, which is the first point I want to talk about. And like I said, we started when she started going to school. Now, that was kindergarten. I'm a stay-at-home mom. We didn't have to do daycare. But if you are a working mom, working dad, or whatever, you can start when they get old enough to understand conversations. Start them in the daycare. But let them know that you're there to listen. Go talk to them on the way to school. And, have small conversations, small talks on the way from school. Because on the way from school, their mind is so full of partially nonsensical, non-useful information that they're not going to need unless they plan on going to Jeopardy, playing on Jeopardy. Their mind is so full coming home from school. But if you can start them young, start them young. If you have older kids, it's And especially if, they're really starting to get into that mom and dad aren't cool, mom and dad just don't understand kind of mindset, I will have a link to a link tree of a podcast that I listen to, my husband listens to, and it's helped his and my relationship with something called a check-in, and they have one for kids too. You can click that link. It'll tell you how the check-ins work, how often, you should do them, you could do them, whatever. Click that link. And also, if rabbit trail a little bit, or, side note, if you and your significant other are struggling, listen to that podcast. I don't think my husband and I would be where we are right now if it wasn't for that podcast. So if Chris and Peaches ever hear this, thank you. I appreciate you. Y'all are amazing. All right, back on track. Do these check-ins with your kids, but don't force conversation. Begin with small things and build from there. Can't just, so tell me about your day. Don't make it awkward. They're already in an awkward stage of life if by the time you probably hear this, or they're just awkward. I don't know when we stop being awkward. Maybe, by the time we're like in we'll say our 80s, when we know everything or we know ourselves better. But start with small things here and there and build. And we have to remember that the older children, they have their own mindset and their own way of thinking, and they're struggling with their emotions, and hormones, which affects emotions and feelings. But one thing that the children do really struggle with is the need to be listened to instead of just hearing what they're saying. And if they are telling you the same thing over and over, it's because they don't feel like they're being listened to. And I know a lot of people, they're the other way around. They're like, I'm listening, but are you hearing? You can think of it either way. I just like listen to being heard. If they're in school or they work, they're old enough to have a job, don't ask those basic questions. If anybody would like to know the list of questions that I will usually ask Boo, I will make a mini-sode of the questions that I ask that you can ask, or I will put them in one of my social medias. I have Twitter, I have Instagram, I am on Rumble, I am on YouTube, and I will do something for that. If that is something you are interested in getting, feel free to change anything. But don't ask the basic questions like, what'd you do today? How was your day? And things like that. Don't ask those questions because they don't trigger anything in their minds. They're like, it was okay. It was fine. We didn't do anything. I have a test on Friday. It's going to suck. I'm going to fail. Have specific questions. And that will trigger something in their brain going, oh, we did this today. We did that today. Oh, I learned this today. Oh, this part of the day super sucked. Build the conversation. One really big thing that I've noticed about myself and my daughter, and sometimes other people, just let them complain. Just let us complain. My husband and I, we've talked about this a lot. And sometimes I just need to vent my feelings and the things that I'm getting frustrated by or that have gone wrong in my day or that need to be fixed. And he's kind of understanding now that I just need to vent. So he'll ask me, Do you just need to vent, or is it something I can fix? And it stops my brain from getting upset that he interrupted me during the vent. But it makes me think, okay, can he fix this, or do I just need to vent? And I will tell him either or. So when it comes to your children complaining, remind them when you are building that open communication that you are their safe space. You are their Switzerland. And I know we've all heard the joke, oh, just consider me Switzerland. And the thing is, you may be the only safe space that they have. Someone that won't tell others without their permission, their secrets, what they're struggling with. It's one of those check-in questions is, are you getting to Switzerland? I know we all remember what it was like becoming teenagers, our bodies changing, our place in society changing, and we needed somewhere and someone to talk to. So now when my daughter says she needs to go to Switzerland, it makes me feel needed and trusted. I'm hearing now from other millennials, and I wasn't the only one that went through this when we were kids. We were told to deal with things, to suck it up, get over it, rub some dirt into it, and we'll be better, we'll be fine. And, sometimes that was good advice. But you can't rub dirt into a broken heart, either from losing a friend because they just didn't want to be friends with you anymore, or breaking up with a boyfriend, a girlfriend. They need you to be their safe space where they can just come and talk to you. And if you find yourself not being able to find time in your day so that you can be their Switzerland, and that open communication that you started growing starts to not become so open, sit down with them and say, hey, I noticed we haven't been talking recently. Let's set aside a day or a time of day where we can just talk. Talk about our days. And that's something you need to do too. You need to talk about your day with them. But remember not to put your adult problems onto their small shoulders. Our problems are not theirs to bear. And that was something I struggled to understand as a kid, that I did not have to carry the burdens of my parents. It was a hard pill to swallow until I became a parent. And I remember the struggles I went through as a kid, that I'm like, I should have been able to go to them and talk to them about this, and been able to do this, do that. And, it's all that generational learning from the mistakes of our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, if, they're still alive. But set that time aside, make that time, cut out your TV time, cut out your refresh time after work, because they're just as mentally or physically exhausted as you are coming home from school, and from, if they're old enough to work, from their job. The biggest thing is start the open communication young. Don't make them feel that they can't come tell you these things. Yes, when they're real little, you gotta take a little grain of salt with everything they say, because they have a tendency to be over dramatic, and they have a tendency to over emphasize on these little things that aren't. While it's important to them, it's not important to the conversation or situation. But as they get older, they'll realize, Mom and Dad really care about me. We talk to each other about these important things, these not so important things. And that's what they need. And they need to be able to speak to you and to other adults about what's going on if they're being bullied. And that kind of segues into the self-defense. And you're probably wondering, how in the world does open communication segue into self-defense? Let me tell you how. You should start with verbal self-defense. Now, I'm not talking witty comebacks or, being mean back verbally. I'm talking about teaching your kids, both male and female, how to say no, how to say stop, how to say I need help to proper authority figures. When I say proper, I'm not just saying, the ones in charge. I mean the ones that actually care, that will work with them to stop the bully from continuing to harass your child, other children. And some of that verbal self-defense may not always be for your child. It may be for some random kid in school that they see. They can go tell a teacher, an administrator, they need to be able to do this before anything physical comes into play. And you have to start this young as well. I understand if you're hearing this and your kids are much older, they're worried that they'll be labeled as a snitch, a tattletale, a narc, whatever kids are calling it now. I don't know. That's the one terminology I don't know for this generation. This is something they should always start with. Part of that open communication and verbal self-defense is letting them know that if their bully threatens them with harsher harassment or even physical violence, you need to remind them that they still need to tell you, and you need to get more involved than you already are. And one thing, this one thing I have heard a lot on social media, and it's the stories of these adults, these administrators and people that work in the school telling these children not to tell their parents what they're doing or what they're teaching their kids. They're grooming them. And this makes me feel very violent. And I am not a physically violent person, but if anybody ever did that to my daughter, I would get physically violent. It would be the one time I would not mind going to jail. Is that the Christian thing to do? No, it's not. But that is the mother instinct. Is you told my child to keep this thing that you're teaching them that is, 1, probably against our religion, 2, against our beliefs and our moral compass. You're trying to groom them to believe everything you do. And during this recording time, there is this actor that came out after 2 decades of keeping a secret of how one of the adults in authority of his life, when he was a child, did very, very bad things to him and told him not to tell. And he came out 2 decades later and decided to tell. I did see a very small clip of this actor's father saying how they weren't really comfortable with this in-charge adult's behavior toward their son. And it makes me so sad that the parents of that time, of those children, actors, they were so concerned about the money and the fame that they weren't concerned about the safety. They weren't listening to their kids. I know for sure there was one adult actor there that noticed this unprofessional behavior of this person in charge and tried to keep these child actors safe. But if another adult tells your child that unless it's a good secret, one surprising mom with this basket of goodies, surprising dad with this card, there are good secrets to have. There are good secrets to have, but if an adult tells them that they need to keep something a secret that they feel makes them uncomfortable, they have to tell you so that you can be aware of the situation, so you can pull your child from the situation. That's where that open communication comes into play. And now, if that verbal self-defense does not produce results or prevent harm, that is when you need to get into the physical self-defense. Now, I know a lot of people, they can't afford to get their child into some kind of boxing, martial arts, or things like this. That's fine. Teach them what you know. If you know how to throw a proper punch, my lisp is getting in my way, then teach them that. Teach them that over and over. Don't stop it one day. And if you see them improving, research other things. YouTube is great for that. The internet is great for teaching. Don't go beyond what you can learn in proper technique, because there really is only so much that you can learn how to do something from a video and not from an actual instructor or professional. If you can't be there for the instructor to physically teach you how to do these things, because a lot of the times you may need your foot, your hand, your body, something needs to be adjusted and you're not understanding, then this is kind of where you need to have a physical teacher with you. And if you can't afford to put them in any classes, research community centers. Churches sometimes do these that have free classes once a week, because it has to be continuous for the kid's body to learn how to get that muscle memory, which is something we are constantly telling our students at our Taekwondo school, that we go over these things so often so that their body will instinctually go to the correct place at the correct time. And as a martial arts student myself, constantly doing the same thing over and over in the beginning was such a drag. I just wanted to learn the new thing. But as I rose up in the ranks, I'm like, this makes more sense now that I can do it without thinking about it. Find a community center, find a church, find something that will teach your kid the physical defense consistently. It can only be once a week. That's fine. As long as they're doing it over and over and getting that muscle memory, it will help them. If you can afford to put them in the classes, do that. Now, it may cut into that extracurricular activity that will give them a scholarship for college, and it may be something you need to decide which is more important, especially if they're really getting bullied. Extracurricular activities can only go so far. Yes, some will give you a scholarship, and unless your child chooses that to be their professional career, that's as far as that activity would go is college. I'm not dissuading anybody from doing those things. I was in band in high school, and I could have gotten a scholarship for it. I did get a scholarship for it to a community college. But again, unless they are pursuing it professionally, college is the end for that. But learning self defense and maybe later on teaching it is a lifelong skill that they will have. And when it comes to those kinds of things, they can be embarrassing, they can be scary, and the best way for them to start getting over that fear is for you to be involved, whether it is as their cheerleader, their support system, and telling them they're doing a good job before, during, after. Not so much during, because you don't want to distract them from learning, but be their vocal cheerleader. After class, you did such a good job. Okay, I saw where you needed to improve. Do you know where you need to improve? Things like this. Don't try to instruct while the teacher is instructing, because that's rude. Just leave it there. Also, if you can, if you're physically able and you physically have the time to do so, join in. Do it with them, because you'll be learning the same thing they are, but you can retain it better. You'll probably get it faster. And you always hear you never want your parent to be your teacher, because totally different relationship and dynamic. But sometimes, if you're both learning it at the same time as an adult, again, you retain it better, you get it quicker, their minds still on computing what their body needs to do, but do it with them. Then they won't feel so scared, embarrassed. And you don't have to go into these things telling any instructor, we're doing this because they're being bullied. And never tell them that, you got to fight. You got to fight. That's the only reason we're here. No. For at least our martial arts class, we tell the students, we are teaching these techniques, these forms, these defenses to make you comfortable in being able to be alone or not panic in a fight if somebody else starts it. And that's really why I wanted my daughter to be able to do that, so that if somebody starts to get physically aggressive with her, because her brain will blank, her body will move into the positions that she needs to defend herself or somebody else. And we have always told our daughter, since she started going to school, if she gets in trouble for fighting, but she did not start it or throw the first punch, then we will not punish her. I know a lot of parents have that mindset. That's a great mindset to have, but you need to make your child understand that they do not take martial arts just so that they can beat somebody up. We tell our students, if we hear that it's what they're doing, they can come to class, but they can't participate or something like this, because that is not why we teach it. The whole Cobra Kai show thing, wow, it got kids interested in doing martial arts again, the way Karate Kid did, and all the Jackie Chan movies and things like that. That is not why people need martial arts. It has great health benefits, keeps you healthy, active, moving. Yes, there are some points where you get so sore you can't get off the couch or out of bed the next morning, but that's just your body telling you that you did work. And yes, you will get hurt, but hopefully you will learn from that mistake. That way That mistake doesn't happen when you are physically defending yourself or your child is physically defending themselves from an attacker, be it a child, another child, or an adult. And that's why you should put them in a self-defense class or a martial art or boxing. I honestly don't know if boxing is considered a martial art. I'll look that up later and let you know. But you do it so that they have confidence in themselves, that they build up that feeling of, if something happens, I can protect myself or someone else. And again, be involved. Be there for your kids. That is one of the biggest things before we get into the next part. And this kind of segues into it. We have to be there for our kids so that they know we are their safe space. We are their Switzerland. That they can come to us, talk to us about things, and that they have the confidence in what they need. Because good kids, loved, well treated, well taken care of children don't turn into bullies. And that really segues into the next point, the open-mindedness. I know it's been a while since, I talked about that, but we have to be open-minded to the situation going on with the bully themselves, especially while they are in school. Now, when they're in college, they know better. By the time they get to college age, they know better. They too have access to social media, whether the parent wants them to or not. So they know better. They know what not to do. But when they're young, their brains are still more slowly developing. They don't know any better. So you can't blame the child for their behavior sometimes. You have to remember that not every child has a healthy and safe home. If your child just suddenly comes to you and says, hey, so-and-so started doing these things, started saying these things, I don't know why. Because sometimes, again, with the open communication, you have to ask your kid if the bully has always been this way, or is it something that changed? And before you start going to the school demanding to talk to the principal, to demand to suspend, to expel a bully, you should talk to, specifically if they are in the same grade, see if you can talk to the teachers about this kid. Ask them if they've noticed any change or that this person has always been this way. A lot of times they can't tell you those things, but they might be concerned enough to, kind of give you a hint, or they themselves look into it. One of the things that I told my husband after the meeting with the principal with Boo was that if something like this, them cursing at her or them getting physically aggressive with Boo, if that happens, yes, I will demand for consequences to these boys. And if Boo gets in trouble for defending herself, she won't get in trouble at home, even if she gets in trouble at school, because we know and we have taught her that she is not the one that, if there is a fight, she's not the one to throw the first punch. But unfortunately, there are so many stories out there how the kid that was defending themselves get into more trouble or severe trouble than the one that actually started it, which is completely unfair. And instead of increasing the pay for superintendents or other higher-ups in the education system who have no actual interactions with schools, they should put those funds for security cameras. Put up those security cameras. Don't tell the students where they are so that they can't find ways around it, so that the actual aggressor of a situation is properly punished. If you talk to your kid and then you start to worry, like if it's one of their friends that suddenly just started bullying or their bullying became more prevalent and more made aware of by your child, you should have a meeting with the parents. I totally like off tracked from my thought. I just remembered it. I told my husband that if anything escalates with those boys even more, even though it is so close to the end of the school year, we are going to sit down with both sets of parents or whatever parental figure is involved in the lives of these boys, and we're going to have a meeting. We're going to talk. It's going to be nerve-wracking as heck, but it's going to happen. And I'm one of those people that like to think I have a good gut instinct about people, especially if we're in person or I can see your visual cues or lack thereof. So if we have to have a meeting with those boys' parents, and that's what I want to do, and that's what you should do. And, again, open mind, not only for the good, but also for the bad, because there are so many people that are so good at hiding their awful character, their awful morals, or moralless lives that, they'll present themselves as these concerned parents or these, how can that, I don't know why this happened. He's always such a good boy. Or these ignorant parents, because it's these pretenders and these ignorants that are really what mess up a kid. And these kids, they don't know how to ask for help. They don't know how to express what they're feeling and what's going on at home in healthy ways. They're just emulating what they see at home or the lack of what they see at home. And we always need to remember to have compassion too for them. Be open-minded about that. Like I said, loved, well-treated, well-taken care of children don't turn into bullies. And a lot of times they are children. You have to remember that. Especially those elementary, those daycare, preschool, pre-K, all the way up to, we'll say, junior high. Because by junior high, they have no excuse. They have access to social media now. They have access to the internet now, and they know better. But these younger ones, they don't know better. Sometimes the young minds don't understand consequences of their actions. Yes, some kind of do, because they see these unhealthy relationships with their parents, with whoever's taking care of them, and how, actions have consequences, whether they're good consequences or bad consequences, but they emulate what they're seeing at home. So we need to be open-minded and not immediately go after these young children who have become bullies with a closed heart and a closed mind. And that is what's really keeping me from demanding these boys be put in some kind of suspension and anything worse. And my husband has the same mindset. We all have great communication with each other. There are times when I struggle really hard with it because it just wasn't the household that I grew up in. I didn't talk about my problems. I couldn't talk about my problems. I couldn't talk about trauma. And I didn't have a safe space. It took over 10 years of being with my husband, as him being my boyfriend, the short fiance period, and being married, to understand I can tell him things. I can say, hey, I don't like it when you do this. Or, hey, can you do this? and not worried about being snapped at or asked, why didn't I do it? I was home. When our kids see a healthy communication, a healthy relationship between parents, they see how to behave with not just their future significant others, but with how to behave around other people. And that is why we need to have open communication all the way with your significant other, with your kids. Communication, self-defense, verbal and physical, and being open-minded. It will remind them that not everybody has the best home life. And that's how we can teach our kids how to deal with bullies and how to, this is going to sound so off the wall, be kind to our bullies. It says in the Bible, in the book of Romans, chapter 12, verse 20, to the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. And I know that sounds very brutal. And what that means is you are not reciprocating the bad behavior that somebody is doing to you. And they are seeing that. And hopefully that is pricking their conscience and saying, hey, I should probably stop doing that. So let's teach our kids to have open communication with us. Let's teach them self-defense, verbal and physical, if there is a need. Let's also teach them to be open-minded. I feel like that is a great place to end this episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. I apologize for all of the rabbit trails and random thoughts that went through my head that came out of my mouth. If you have any comments, questions, recommendations of your own, you can send all of those to southernmilennialmoms@gmail.com. That email address is in the description. I hope that something registered for you like it did for me when I was, making my notes on what to talk about so I wouldn't ramble. But again, send all of those comments, questions, and recommendations. If there are not any comment sections in whatever streaming service you're listening to this podcast on, send those to southernmilennialmoms@gmail.com. From this Southern Millennial Mom, I love y'all. Y'all have a blessed day. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.